Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today is part 2 of my Wargaming Club series, and I'm going to be talking about finding your community, engaging interest. I think a club is nothing without its members, so how do you find them? And the thing to think about this is basically a War Games club is all about the gaming, generally, all about playing, and there's loads of different types of players out there. And I think a lot of wargaming players don't give themselves credit for actually thinking about the style of game they want to play and finding a gaming group which suits them. And style of game I'm talking about, I'm not talking about periods and scales. I'm talking about sort of casual gamers. You know, those that just want to throw some models down on the table and play some games. Competitive players, hobby focused players, those who are more interested in building and painting armies, historical refight type players, and there'll be more different types of players. I think one of the things from my experience of playing cards, Game of Thrones card game, was uh, there were archetypes of players identified, and of course you blend of a lot of them, but predominantly there were three types of players. And Game of Thrones, so we're given Game of Thrones names. So if there were the Ned players, Ned Stark players, and they were into constructing themed decks based around the books and stories. So, for example, if you had a Stark deck, you might not include any sort of Lannister cards, for example. Next up came the combo players, Shagger players, as we're called, Shagger, son of Dolph, who wanted three axes and the ability to use three axes. So those decks were based around combinations that would not always work, but when they did work, would be fun and interesting for the person that built the deck. And finally, there were sort of the players who were competitive, kind of win focused players, and they call themselves Jamie. Jamie Lannister's the best swordsman in the realm. And players were able to talk about the archetype, and if you were going to play a game, and you knew what sort of player you were, you're able to talk about that. So maybe a player might adjust the deck based on that. And I think historical gamers don't talk about don't talk about them sorts of things enough, or think about who they are. In a future video, I've got an idea of a video called "Nobody Deserves a Game," which is about actually if you're bringing the wrong playset mentality to a group, probably is a win at all when we talk about competitive players, I'm not talking about win at all cost players. You can be competitive and you can be a brilliant human being and make sure your opponent has a good game. There's a video coming up about gamesmanship. It's probably going to be in a slightly different series, and another video called "Nobody Deserves a Game." So nobody wants to be that win at all cost competitive game. But anyway, understand yourself and what you want out of a gaming group, and that's going to set the tone for it. I'll talk about that in another video. So identify potential members. Maybe you've already got a bit of a network sorted out. Certainly, when we set up the SEVC War Games Hub in Glasgow, there was a group of us who had played at the Great Game that were coming together to play massive Napoleonic war games twice a year. And we decided, actually, let's form a club. Now, from that, most of the people actually formed our sort of bigger gaming group didn't come over to the club. It wasn't for them, but we knew other people and pulled them together. We knew what we wanted to create and spoke to people, and they came down to it. In your town, maybe there's local game stores, hobby stores. You could talk to the owners. You know, people that work in stores are great for networking. All they do all day is network, is talk to people, is understanding it. You know, you might have local Facebook, Discord, Reddit, and forums. You can get in contact with wargamers. There might be a broader sort of geographical wargame Facebook group, for example, you can tap into. So when we set up our club, it was in Glasgow. There were no Glasgow wargaming groups set up. However, there was a wargaming group in Scotland. So I was able to put some posts on that and find other people in Glasgow, at least promoters to people in Glasgow as a sort of sub-geography of the Scottish one. The other thing you might find is there could be some specialist groups. So, for example, Bot Action Scotland, because we were going to be predominantly a historical gaming club, we'll talk to them, or Epic Battles, because you never know. These groups will often have several thousand members. Some of those members will be quite dormant and just sort of absorbing content. Nothing wrong with that. So if you put a post up, I'm setting up a club in X place, then you'll be surprised at how many people come out the woodwork. The other thing is, if we're talking about local hobby shops and stuff, is old-fashioned posters. The digital age hasn't taken over everything. Certainly when I was doing live role-playing events and organisations, I went round sort of adjacent spaces and put up posters about it. Libraries, hobby shops, bookshops. So once you've got your kind of starting to talk to people in your local area, you've got to gauge interest. And gauging interest lets you start thinking about the sort of resources you need to put into it, size of function room or community hall you'd need. Be nothing worse than jumping in on a big hall with an expensive hire and finding you don't have the gaming group to sustain that. So maybe run surveys. Once you've got a group of interested people, and not all those interested people will end up as club members, find out what they want, social media polls, and maybe even organise a casual gaming night to meet potential meetings. You don't need to jump in with a hire of a hall straight away. Certainly, like I say, our club formed because we were hiring a pub function room to put on war games events twice a year. Also, when you're talking to people, gauge what people want. Ask them what they want when you're doing your research into it. Casual player tournaments or campaigns. Actually, if you're gaming, if the people you're talking about all they want to do is tournaments, well, maybe he's finding somewhere you can do a tournament once a month format, as opposed to your weekly, more friendly gaming club, could be the solution for you. So yes, be flexible. Just because a lot of clubs meet every week doesn't mean you need to meet every week. Your club can also be focused on a particular game system, or can broaden out to a game system. Like I say, find out who's out there and what they might be more interested in. So, for example, a city like Glasgow can support a lot more varied games than, say, Carlisle, a city running, or Darlington. Once you've got your kind of core of people who are going to organise your club with you, start partnering with local shops for promotion. Where do people go? Because I can bet you bottom dollar, even the best club run city in best city with loads of clubs will have a load of people that just don't engage with clubs or haven't heard about clubs. Attend local gaming events and conventions. If you know some stuff's on, go down and talk to a local convention or event. Now, what I would say is, if there is a club in your city or town, don't go along with the express intention of poaching players. Talk to the organisers. If you are setting up a club, work together. There's going to be some talk about clubs working together and supporting each other. But yeah, don't go along to a club thinking you could poach people for your club. That's just not cricket. Also think about maybe adjacent clubs and societies there might be. So, for example, a board game club could have members who'd be interested in wargaming, or maybe card gaming groups, or maybe even if there's a science fiction group and you are going to be doing historical group, you can work really well together. In fact, the videos you see going through is from the SCVC Hub, and I'm a trustee for the military veteran charity. So we used during the day. So I identified was on a night and at weekends a space was free to set up a club. So I've set up my historical club, and helped another club, which is predominantly a 40k club, set up on Fridays. And that works really well together. You know, if a player is interested in either or, they can go to either or, and we can work well together and support each other in using the space. And we're both offering very different things. So yeah, so if you are going to work with another club to set up a club, talk to them about it. Don't be sleek it and sly, as we'd say in Scotland. So yeah, getting out there and the research of finding your community is going to be a big part of setting up the club. Networking, you will find all sorts of pockets of people out there that might be interested in a club that don't already go to a club, and you've got to a point, leave your preconceptions at the door. When I set up the ACVC Wargames Fellowship, predominantly my friends and the player base was heavily into big games of 28mm Napoleonics. So I thought that would be a predominant thing. What happened was we found a load of ball action people who attended some tournaments in Scotland but didn't have a regular place to play, and they flocked to us. So actually, ball action's a fairly dominant system in the club, but that's cool. That's not something I expected when I set up the club. So there you go, finding community, engaging interest. Next time we'll talk about finding the right venue where you could play and what you should look for. On a broader topic, I'd like to hear from you about where do you find wargamers in your area? What does the local scene look like? What do local clubs do to promote themselves? And I look forward to chatting to you in another video. So that's bye for now. Goodbye.